Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar all about grad school. I'm Cindy Strobridge, and I'll be one of the moderators today. This webinar is the second in our virtual Career and Professional Development Week series, so I hope that you'll continue to join us for our other career development topics. Before we get started, I'm going to go through a few housekeeping items. At this time, all participants are in listen-only mode, and the webinar is expected to last 40 minutes. Time permitting, questions will be addressed at the end of this presentation. If you do have a question, you can submit that through the Zoom group chat box. Also, this presentation is being recorded. You'll be able to view the recording later today on our YouTube channel, and a link to the recording will be sent out to participants. Now, let me introduce our other moderator, Kim Meredith.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. I'm so pleased to have you join us today, and hope that this presentation will be meaningful to you. Cindy and I have worked very hard, as well as our presenter today, so we hope you'll have some takeaways. This week, like Cindy mentioned, is Career and Professional Development Week, which is an offering of all virtual programming that enhances professionalism and focuses on the overall career development of all Mercerians. We've offered all of the virtual events to students and alumni free of charge, and we hope you'll join multiple events. Take a look at the schedule at the website below, including a second part of today's presentation that'll take place on Thursday about graduate school. So social media is a great complement to your Handshake account in that you'll see our Mercer Career and Professional Development Office happenings and the announcements in our daily feed. So please pull up your favorite social media stream now and take just a second to follow us if you would. Perhaps consider making a post about today's presentation using hashtag #ConnectToYourFuture. Now, we are making all of our appointments with career consultants and counselors available via Zoom and telephone. So use your Handshake career platform to keep you connected. Use it to meet with us and stay on your career plan. Inside the appointments tool, you'll see an option to select phone or virtual appointment. And let us help you to connect to your future and help you stay on the career planning course. At this time, I'm going to introduce today's speaker, Courtney Honeycutt. Courtney is the coordinator of pre-graduate school advising with academic and advising services on campus. She's been with Mercer for a year and a half, and she received her bachelor's degree in political science and Spanish from Furman University and received her master's degree in counselor education with an emphasis in student affairs from Clemson University. She has been working in student support roles for nearly 7 years, and her favorite part of her current job is being able to connect with students and being a part of their growth and learning. We are so thankful for Courtney, and I'm going to turn it over to her now.
Hello, and thank you to everyone joining us today. I am glad to be able to talk with you all virtually, and I'm glad that those of you who are here today have joined us. So what I'm going to be doing today is talking about graduate school in general. In your journey to graduate school, I'll go through pretty much a little bit of everything that has to do with graduate school, though a lot of these topics I could talk about more in depth with you individually. So at any point, if you have questions, please write them down and save them for the end, and we'll be sure to get to as many of those as we can. I'll go ahead and get started for now. So first of all, I want to answer the question, what is graduate school? Graduate school is a focused advanced study in an academic discipline or profession. In other words, this is a chance for you to take what you're studying and go further, go deeper into that specifically. You're not going to be doing any general education courses anymore. You're only going to be diving into the topics that you specifically want to study and whatever is related to that topic. So it's a way to go further into your areas of passion. There are certain types of graduate degrees. There's a master's degree, which is usually what's seen as the degree to follow a bachelor's degree. It's usually a 2 to 3 year degree, and it can either be research focused, including a thesis, which I'll touch on a little bit later, or it can be curriculum focused or maybe even professionally focused. And in order to train you for a career as, say, a dietitian or a nutritionist or a therapist. Those are professional master's degrees. A PhD is where you receive your doctorate. It is typically a 5 to 7 year type of program in which what you're doing is very research focused. So you'll be taking some coursework, but a lot of those extra years are going to be devoted to doing research in your area and writing an original piece of scholarship known as a dissertation. These last two are kind of linked. You can also get what's called a professional degree, and I mentioned this when I talked about the master's degree. Professional master's degrees are things like the MBA, where you can become an accountant, though that requires a CPA, which is another professional master's degree that you can get. Some areas that you work in, some professions require a certification or licensure, and those are often wrapped up in master's programs, professional master's programs. Some examples of that would include becoming a therapist or becoming a physical therapist, an athletic trainer. Those are going to have professional master's degrees and usually licensing boards that you have to get through to join that profession. So when you think about graduate school, there are kind of two questions you should really be starting with to ask yourself. The first one is, should I go to graduate school? It's not a decision you should make lightly, and it's not for everyone. And the second question is, if you do want to go to graduate school, where do you go? So let's break those down. So these are some of the benefits of a master's or a professional degree. I'm going to kind of lump those together because they are often done that way in graduate school. A master's degree can set you apart. In a world where a lot more adults are getting a bachelor's degree, a master's degree just gives you that next level of education and experience. It can also sometimes take the place of years of experience. Now you see this at the bachelor's level as well, and it just expands when you get a master's degree. So you may be applying for a job that requires, say, 5 years of experience or a master's degree in the specific area. Almost always a master's degree will increase your earning potential and your career options. The amount it will increase your earning potential varies based on which profession you go into, but like I said, it's almost across the board an increase. I would almost say it's definitely an increase, but I don't want to be too certain. And you get, another benefit is you get to specialize in a specific area. So maybe you studied computer science in undergrad, or maybe you studied English. What you can specialize in at the master's level, you can, instead of just computer science, maybe you want to study specifically artificial intelligence. Or maybe instead of English and all the different areas of literature, you simply want to study on 17th century literature in the West. So this is a chance for you to really focus in on what you care about the most. And like I said, the increase in earning potential and the years of experience, that's dependent on the career field or area of study. So make sure you do your research or talk to an advisor such as me when you look into a master's degree to see what benefits it's going to have to you in your career. So the benefits of a PhD, a lot of the same benefits as a master's degree, but a little bit further, as you would expect from a degree that takes a little bit longer. With a PhD, you are qualified to do research or advanced development in positions in industry, government, or academia. You're also qualified to teach at the university level. You see another increase in earning potential with a PhD, though typically the increase from bachelor's to master's is larger than the increase from master's to PhD. So you'll still see an increase, but the largest marginal increase is from bachelor's to master's. And again, you get that specialization in a specific area and you go even more specialized than you would at a master's level. So should I go to graduate school? That's the next big question. Like I said, it's not for everyone, and you don't want to devote your time to something that you're not so sure about. So some questions to ask yourself are, what are your motivations? What do you hope to achieve? So motivations, are you interested in pursuing a passion that you don't think you'll ever have an opportunity to study outside of graduate school? Are you looking for a career option that is going to require a master's degree either now to enter the career field or down the road? What do you hope to achieve? Are you looking to do some research in a scientific area or get specialization in licensure as an athletic trainer? These are things that would motivate you to go to graduate school, among others, I'm sure. And then you want to make sure that graduate school is actually going to get you there. So if you just want to get a better job, for example, graduate school might help you, but it also might not. It's going to depend a lot on that career field. So that's when you want to talk to an advisor or someone who can know more about your area and graduate school related to that to make sure. And lastly, talk to your professors. talk to mentors or your internship or research supervisors and see what they think. Learn about grad school from them within your field, what you want to do, and see if those line up. Those are great resources for you that you absolutely that you absolutely want to take advantage of. And of course, there are some not so great reasons for going to graduate school. So not knowing what you want to do and you're not ready to get a job. Those are not good reasons to go to graduate school. First of all, like I've said several times now, graduate school is to get specialized education. If you don't know what you want to do or what you want to study, you're going to find yourself at a loss from day one. What's more is when you don't know what you want to do, is the difficulty of graduate school becomes even more difficult because you don't care about it, you're not invested. So make sure you know what you want to do. The second is that you're not ready to get a job. Well, I see this a lot, and it's a very unfortunate situation to be in, because the reality is, if you don't know what you want to do with graduate school, it's not necessarily going to help you get a better job, and it's probably going to be harder than trying to get a job in the job market. So if that's what you're trying to do, that's what you're avoiding, I'd say graduate school is not for you. So keep that in mind. So where should you go to graduate school? Thinking of where to apply for graduate school or where to go into programs is a lot different than it was in undergrad. In undergrad, maybe you knew institutions from sports or from being local institutions, parents who went there, guidance counselors suggested them, maybe they were top schools in your area of study. Those are the things you kind of looked at. And in a lot of schools probably sent things to you in the mail or sent you emails kind of recruiting you. Graduate school is a little bit different. You have to target your search for programs based on your specific needs. You're not so much looking at how many student organizations are on campus or what the campus life is like. You're looking specifically at your chosen area of study in that department. So like I said, just consider your area of study. Consider what the coursework is. Do they have the specialization that you're interested in? They may have a graduate program in biology, but they might not have a graduate program in specifically animal biology or whatever subset of that you want to study. If they don't, that might not be the right curriculum for you. You can also see if they have a practicum or experience-based curriculum, which would be for more of a professional degree, or if it's research-based. So sometimes there's some choice within those fields, so you want to see what curriculum fits you best and fits your goals best. Look at the faculty and research areas at that program. This is especially true if you want to do a PhD. So like I said, if you want to study something particular about animal biology, what you want to see on a program's website is a faculty member who's studying that area. Otherwise, you won't have someone to supervise your research, and you'll kind of just be forced into whatever they do have. So make sure you tailor that as well. And then of course, you'll want to look at the admission requirements and make sure that you can meet those to be admitted. There's a lot of other things to consider, and I could talk about each of these specifically. So I'm just going to kind of brush over them now unless you have questions at the end. Reputation is a little bit different. You don't really want to focus on the reputation of the university as a whole so much as you want to focus on the reputation of the specific department, say the biology department or the computer science department. And the way you find out about that reputation would be to do things like see what their graduates have done, what their graduate school alumni have gone off to do. If research is a topic area, research is an important part of that area, see what scholarships have been posted recently. Are there scholarly articles from those faculty members that have been posted in the last year or so, or from their graduate students? Are they posted in reputable journals? These are some good things to look at. Some professional master's degrees will lead into professions that require licensure, and to get that licensure, you want to attend a program that has the appropriate accreditation. This is something that exists for various subsets of fields. Dietitian and nutritionist is one of them. They have a licensing board and an accreditation board that ensures that the level of education you receive at that program is up to the standards they expect for their profession. Another licensing board example would be mental health counseling. You'll have athletic training has a licensing board, all of these things that you want to look at. I tend to focus less on location in graduate school. I encourage students to, broaden their scopes, look around the nation or even abroad. But there are still some things you want to consider. For example, you're going to be living there for the next 2 to 5 years, maybe 3 to 7, depending on the type of program. So you want to make sure that you're going to be happy living there. You also might have some location restrictions. Maybe you have a family that you're starting and your partner has a job in a specific location. Then you're kind of geographically bound. Or maybe you care for family members or anything of that nature. So you kind of have to pick your location based on that. Those are all good reasons to narrow your search in that way. In some degrees, there are different times or timelines for completing that degree. Some programs might be an 18-month program, or you might see a 12-month program or 15-month program. This is especially true in business and accounting programs or economic programs. You'll see that variation. So if you want to get it done quicker or in a part-time timeline, for example, that's something that you would want to look into. Diversity is always important. It's not just that you want the school to acknowledge and respect diversity and the importance of it, but when you really think about it, when you're getting a specialized degree, you don't want to hear the same perspectives over and over again, because that's narrowing what you're learning. The more different types of people, different types of perspectives you get, the broader your learning in that area is. So diversity should be something you care about. Maybe you're also interested in the program or cohort size. Some graduate programs are going to be larger at some universities than at others. One large state university may have about 30 to 40 graduate students in a specific area. Another one might have 5. So if you want that more one-on-one attention with faculty, or if you'd feel more comfortable in a larger group, pay attention to the cohort size. Look at what facilities they have. Do they have graduate student housing? What do their labs look like? What about offices for graduate assistants? These are all things to consider. And lastly, make sure you talk to current grad students. Usually if you reach out to a program administrator or the staff member for that program, they can connect you to current graduate students, and those students are often more than happy to tell you about what they like, what they maybe don't like, what's good about their program and everything like that. So reach out, don't be afraid to connect. Those resources are there for you. And the last big thing is, how are you going to pay for it? So when it comes to funding graduate school, a lot of people think that you automatically are going to have to pay out of pocket. That can be true for some professional master's degrees, but in other areas, depending on the area, it can actually be a lot easier to get it funded outside of student loans. One of these ways is through graduate assistantships, in which you would receive basically a part-time job from the university or from your department. You would work maybe as a teaching assistant, running labs or teaching undergraduate courses, or research assistant in a faculty member's lab, among other things, and then you would receive reduced or waived tuition, reduced fees, and a stipend. So that's a great gig, obviously. There are also fellowships and scholarships. These exist both internally, which means that the department you're applying to has fellowships available or scholarships available to award to their incoming students, or you can apply to external fellowships and scholarships, just like you did with undergrad. That's something you want to do to supplement your funding. This last one is a kind of different route, or sometimes a non-traditional route, and that's employer funding. If you want to get a degree and you kind of want to work at the same time, whether it's to make money or because you have to, or you want to get some work experience at the same time, some employers would be willing to fund your continuing education, especially if they have like a loyalty program where they fund your education and maybe you keep working with them for 5 years. This is pretty common in like business settings. It's also common if you work, for example, the federal government. They'll often fund a master's degree for you. And another one sometimes that might be good to think about is that some institutions of higher education, so some colleges and universities, include free or reduced tuition as part of their employee benefits. So if you're interested in working in those settings and you have a talent or a skill for it, maybe that's something you could look into. It's actually how I got my master's degree. I was already working in student services and working with students, and was able to take advantage of those kinds of benefits to get my master's degree in higher education. Another thing I want to tackle is, when should you go to graduate school? So I think a lot of people expect the typical trend to be, okay, I finished undergrad, now I have to go to graduate school. And sometimes you'll even hear from your parents or professors or various people that they'll say, if you don't go now, you're never going to go. That's not always true. It might be true, and it might be true for you. You know yourself best, but that is absolutely not always true. we often see people, med school, for example, the average age of the student is 26. You know, students finish college at 22. So that's a broad range of ages there to get an average of 26, for example. So consider working for a year or two before graduate school if you want to clarify what you want or don't want in a career. If you get some work experience and you hate it, that's valuable because you know that that's not what you want to do and that's definitely not what you want to study. On the other hand, if you're kind of not sure whether you want to go to grad school, whether this is the path for you, if you go work for a year or two, you can realize, yeah, this is really what I want to do. I feel confident in it. And then when you go to graduate school, you're all the more motivated to get that degree and get that education. Another good reason to take a break is to earn some money. If you know you're going to a professional degree field especially, or if you want to have some cushion with graduate student stipends, there's absolutely nothing wrong with saving some money. That might be a smart move. You might want to take some time off of academic settings. Now, I'm sure at least one of you in here, if not all of you, has experienced some sort of academic burnout at some point. And that's not really the best way to go into graduate school. If you need a break from school that's more than like the summer 2 months, that's okay. Take a break and come back to grad school in a year, 2 years, 10 years, whatever works best for you. It's always going to be there as an option. There's no age limit on graduate school. I said this a little bit, but be certain that you want to tackle graduate school and that that's what you want to do. And you should also take some time off if you want to try and take advantage of any employer benefits that you might be able to get. So now that you've done all kind of the background and reflective work about do you want to go, when do you want to go, you get to the point where you're actually starting to apply to graduate schools. So first things first, it's never too early or too late to start thinking about it. So whether you're a sophomore, a junior, or a senior, or even a freshman, it's a great time to think about graduate school. There's some work we can do in that. If you want to go directly after undergrad, if that's what you want to choose to do, you want to start looking at it more seriously in your junior year. That would be a good time to meet with me and sort of plot out what your track looks like and what your timeline looks like. And I also work with alumni. So if you are a junior or senior or any class level and you think you're going to probably need a break or want some work experience, I'll still be here when you come back. Once a bear, always a bear. So I work with alumni as well. And talk it over with your professors, mentors, and close family members. They are good resources for figuring out what some good programs might be. So if you really love chemistry and that's what you want to study, you know, your chemistry professors went to grad school too. And they probably had some sort of experience, good or bad, and they can tell you about that and some of their colleagues' experiences as well. So you can learn more about different institutions and get that hands-on and personal advice or information. And like I said, as always, please meet with an advisor. I'm more than happy to talk with you wherever you're at in the process. When you're looking at schools to apply to, you also want to look at the admissions requirements and see if you meet them. One of the first numerical sort of hurdles is going to be your GPA. A lot of graduate schools usually will start at least above a 3.0. Some more competitive, they're going to expect above a 3.4 or even a 3.6. It depends on the type of program you're applying to. You want to make sure that you at least meet those requirements before you apply, or that you've talked to an admissions representative to address some of those maybe a slightly too low GPA or something like that, so that you know you have a chance. The second numerical thing they're going to look at is your GRE or test scores. So most graduate schools are going to require a standardized test of some sort. The GRE is the most common. It's kind of like the SAT too, which might terrify you, but I promise it's not that bad. That's a whole other topic. But there's also things like the MCAT for medical school, LSAT for law school, and the GMAT for usually accounting or business programs. And those test scores are going to be important when you come in to look at admissions. Once you look at those two numbers, it kind of broadens from there. They want to look at you more holistically. So what will come into play is your personal statement. That's an essay you'll have to write. It's similar to what you wrote in your essay to apply to undergrad, but this is a lot more in depth. They're expecting it to be an example of your writing, a professional writing sample where they get to know you a little better. So it can play a big role in your admissions decision. They'll also look at your extracurriculars, of course, whether you did research, internship, or had work experience. Not that those are required, but they'll look at that and see how that plays into your application. They're also going to read your letters of recommendation and see what your faculty members or your supervisors have to say about you. And you want those to be good things. So building on that, these are the application requirements. You're going to have usually an online application these days and some sort of fee. so I hear this from graduate schools, a hot tip, I guess, or from graduate students, that when they're applying to graduate schools, if they can't afford the fee, they'll sometimes call the department they're interested in and explain that, and can often get an application fee waiver. So if application fees are what's stopping you from applying to graduate school, reach out to those programs. The worst they can say to you is no, and you might get a yes, and you save the $35 or the $50 application fee. Another application requirement is going to be your transcripts. This isn't just your Mercer University transcript, but if you took any summer courses, for example, you'll need the transcripts from those universities. Or if you did dual enrollment in high school, you'll need those transcripts as well, because they want to look at all of your college credits. I've mentioned letters of recommendation before. These are letters from faculty members or sometimes research supervisors or work supervisors who are going to talk about, who know you really well, and are going to talk about your strengths and why you're a good fit for this program. Usually you're going to need about 3 of them. So wherever you are right now, start thinking of and getting to know your faculty members who are in areas that you're interested in. Because if it comes time to ask for a letter of recommendation and you don't really know any of them, or they don't really know you, it's going to be difficult. So take advantage of the small university, the small liberal arts college you've applied to, where faculty want to work with students, and get to know your faculty members. I mentioned the GRE or other standardized tests. Those are usually application requirements. So, as we get more and more modern, some places are waiving those if you have a certain GPA or if you received a certain SAT score. So if you're looking to avoid a standardized test, maybe that figures into whether or not you apply to a school. That's feasible in a lot of areas. We can talk about that. The personal statement is very important. You're going to have to write, they might be called a statement of purpose. They might ask a prompt, but ultimately these are getting to the same thing. Why are you applying to graduate school? Why do you want to study this? And why are you qualified? And the most important thing is you don't want this to read off like a resume in prose. You want your personal statement to be just that, personal. And once you want it to sound like you, to sound realistic, and show that you've really reflected on why you want to go to graduate school. Because they don't want to, as much as I don't want you to go to graduate school if you're not sure, graduate schools don't want to accept people who aren't passionate or aren't interested in what they're going to be studying. And then finally, there might be some specific program requirements. Engineering, for example, might require an engineering subject test as an addition to the standard GRE. You may, if you go into an MBA program, a lot of them will require 2 years of professional experience before you can apply. So look into those programs and make sure there's not something specific to that program that they require, something to pay attention to. And this is a general timeline for the application process. This is a timeline that is specifically for those who want to go to graduate school directly after undergrad, but it can be modified for whenever you want to go to graduate school. And you usually do that by saying, instead of May of junior year, looking into the standardized tests and prepping for those, you're going to do about 12 to 15 months beforehand that you want to start looking into those tests. And you, as well as May of junior year, in the spring of your junior year, or about 15 months before you want to enroll in graduate school, you want to start looking for programs. Don't leave that to the last minute, because you want to make sure you do an in-depth search of the different programs and you find programs to apply to that you really, really love. So that's really important. August of your senior year, or about 12 months before you're going to enroll in graduate school, it's time to take that test you've been studying for. And the reason why you don't have to take it this early, but usually the reason why I recommend it is so that if you're not happy with your test scores, you have time to study and take it again, a second time if necessary, or even a third time, depending on what you want to do. And that's different with things like the LSAT, where the LSAT has very specific times throughout the year that you can take the LSAT, and it's only at those times. So it's harder to retake the LSAT than it is things like the GRE. The MCAT is somewhat similar. So keep that in mind. And we will talk about that for your specific track in an advising appointment. So September or November, about 9 months before you want to go enroll in graduate school, get those application materials ready. Your transcripts, your personal statement, request your letters of recommendation early, and remind your faculty as the deadlines approach, because the earlier you ask them, the more likely they're going to say yes, and the more likely they're going to be enthusiastic about it. If you come in the middle of midterms and ask your faculty member to write your letter of recommendation, they may be less excited, and that's no good. So make sure you ask them early enough. And then finally, December, or about 6 to 8 months before you would enroll, it's time to apply. those deadlines vary depending on which schools you're applying to, and some of them have kind of like open application seasons, but usually around December to January is when you're going to be finishing those applications. And for most graduate schools, you'll hear back around March, sometimes a little bit earlier, usually not later than that, because among grad schools, there's usually an honored date of April 15th where they expect students to be considering decisions or considering admission from all the schools they've applied to, and students aren't expected to make a decision on which school they'll attend until April 15th. So I have here written, consider deferring acceptance with a question mark. The reason why I put this here is because a lot of students don't realize that some graduate programs have policies in place where if you apply to the program, but for whatever reason need or decide to take a year before you admit, they may be able to defer your acceptance for up to a year, including your financial awards. So reasons you might do this would be you apply to graduate school, you're excited, and then you hit the end of senior year and you're like, I can't go back to school in August. I need to take a break. That would be a situation where you'd ask about deference possibilities for those admissions. Or maybe you get sick or a family member gets sick and you have to care for them. Another reason why you might want to look into deferring that acceptance. So I just put that in there so you're aware that sometimes there's more options than just, well, you got your admissions and you changed your mind, that's that. So don't give up on it if you end up in one of those situations. So as Kim mentioned earlier, I'll be doing another webinar talk on Thursday at 1 to talk about applying to graduate school, and I'll go way more in depth with these pieces that I've kind of brushed over. So if you're in the process or see yourself going to be in the process soon, please join us Thursday. And there's the link below that you can go to if you want to register. So I'll give you a second to copy that or take a picture, whatever you need to do if you would like. Okay, so how do you prepare an undergrad for success in graduate school? The good news is to prepare for graduate school, you're going to keep doing a lot of the things that everyone else is recommending that you do in college. We want you to explore your interests and keep learning more about yourself. So that means joining different clubs and deciding they're not for you or going all the way with them. That means taking random classes for your general education requirements just because it sounds kind of cool and seeing where that gets you. Because the more you know about what you do and you don't like, you do and don't care about, the more you're going to be able to focus on what matters to you when it comes to choosing a career or choosing a graduate school program. You want to earn and maintain a strong GPA. Academic performance is always important. So do your best in that route. If you're having difficulty, use resources to get better at your academic performance. And to the freshmen especially, or those who are worried about that freshman year, if you had a tough semester or a tough freshman year, or even later in your school years, that's not going to make or break you. It's more about what you got out of that experience. And there's a great opportunity to talk about that in things like your personal statement. So if one semester you just got really, overwhelmed and you didn't manage your time well, but the following semesters you realized what went wrong and what you needed to do to take better care of yourself, and you implemented it and had a stronger GPA, they care more about that learning transition and overcoming difficulties than they do about the fact that you had a C in one of your classes. That's more, so your story is more important. What you learn along the way is more important. And please, please, please build relationships with your faculty. You're at a small school, there's no reason why you shouldn't be doing this. It's one of the big advantages of being at a small liberal arts institution. Talk to your faculty, go to office hours, ask questions, or even just introduce yourself more personally at their office hours and talk about generally what you're interested in. You never know where that can go. Even if you don't end up asking for letters of recommendation, they're valuable relationships and they can often help you with where you're at in the coursework. So build relationships with faculty. And you hear this whether you're applying for internships or whether you're looking to apply for jobs or anything that you might do. Maybe you're applying to fellowships. What you want to do is get involved, right? So take on active roles or leadership positions in clubs or organizations. Don't just be an attending member, but if you really are passionate about something, then be the secretary of the club or the organization, be the president, apply to do those things. And once again, I'm sure you've heard this before, but quality is better than quantity when it comes to your involvement. If you were involved with 20 things but don't have a good story to tell about any of them, or can't tell me what you learned about them, specifically, that's not as valuable as maybe being in 2 or 1 or 3 specific organizations and have done a lot with those in depth and learned a lot about yourself and made a difference somewhere. So quality over quantity. And lastly, what we always preach, get involved in research if that's what you're interested in. Try and get an internship in a field you think you might want to consider. And CCPD is a great resource for internships and or work experience. If you want to study academically over the summer, apply to fellowships. We have an office of fellowships and scholarships that can find you a program for almost anything you want to do. Just go talk to Dr. David Davis or Dr. Cameron Kunzelman, and they'll find a fellowship that fits you. And those fellowships are competitive, right? So if you get into a competitive fellowship program as an undergrad, and then you apply to graduate school, we see that you're already competitive. You've already qualified for something that required you to be outstanding. So that sticks out for you. The same is true for an internship. And if you have quality research, then they know that you can do research in graduate school. If you are doing something that's people-oriented or cares about their communities and you have a lot of service experience, that's valuable. All of these things can be valuable for you when you apply to graduate school. And if you decide not to apply to graduate school but you've done all these things, guess what? You're really competitive in the job market as well. So you can't go wrong. These are the things I want you to focus on in undergrad. And then you've gotten through all of that. It's time to go to graduate school. So how do you prepare for success there? How do you make sure you succeed in graduate school, and how is it different? So the curriculum is more focused. I've said that it's specialized, what that means is you're not going to have those semesters where it's like, oh, I have a really hard chem class and a bio class, but I balanced it out with intro to theater. You're not going to really have those options. You're going to be taking more in-depth classes all over your schedule. So it's more focused and more difficult in that way. And of course, the material is more advanced. So it's a little bit more, it's more difficult to study the material itself. And you're going to have to learn new study habits possibly and reapproach the ways you learn. A lot of times it's also going to be more experiential, like for professional master's degrees, where you might have a practicum requirement as part of your graduate degree requirements or an internship requirement. And there might be independent learning requirements. So some courses may require you to do some background research before you can be ready to take that course in graduate school. And that's something that you have to be able to take the initiative on. You're always going to be expected to take the initiative and to be independent in graduate school, to a reasonable degree. You'll have an advisor, a faculty member who's there to kind of guide you, but they're not going to push you along. You've got to take the initiative and take ownership of your work, and therefore show that you really care about it. There's different grading in graduate school and different expectations at that level. So in undergrad, you have A, B, C, D, F, some pluses or minuses in there. Graduate school, they get rid of the D. So you're either going to get an A, B, or C, or you're going to get an F. There's no kind of middle ground of a D. And their expectations are much higher. So if you get a B in graduate school, let alone a C, that's really not good. That's something to be concerned about. Whereas here, you might be really happy with all Bs, or a couple Bs and a few As, and maybe even a C. That would be okay. In graduate school, their expectations are higher. Everything has kind of raised the bar for you. So you want to make sure that you're putting your all in it from the beginning. Another thing about the grading is you're going to have less grades overall. You might have, for example, an INT class right now in your schedule, and maybe you have a big paper due at the end. So along the way, you might have a deadline for your introduction, or a deadline for your references, or a deadline for the first half of your paper, broken up and graded along the way. Whereas in a graduate school, you may have a course where you have one big research paper you have to do, and it's due at the end of the semester, and that's your whole grade, and there's no in between. There's no check-ins, there's no grades for your references. It's all about that final presentation, that final paper. That doesn't mean you can't get help. That means that, once again, you have to take the initiative to meet with your faculty advisor, meet with the instructor, and be like, this is what I'm working on. These are the references I'm using. Am I on track? Can you read this over for me and give me some feedback? So those are the kinds of expectations that you expect. It may or may not be true that you'll have smaller cohorts in graduate school. Since you're at Mercer, you have small classes on the whole, but they might get even smaller in graduate school. It could be that the degree program you're in has 5 students, and you could be in class with 1 or 2 other students, which can be very intimidating in graduate school if you're just kind of almost one-on-one or two-on-one with a faculty member. So that's some things to consider. And you'll be more involved departmentally and less at the university level. So there's definitely possibilities for engagement at the university level. A lot of universities will have graduate student government or graduate student organizations, but really what you're focusing on academically and where you're going to be spending most of your time and engaging with most people is going to be within your department and within the graduate students there. So you can kind of become a little bit sequestered in your focus area or with graduate students in general. So if you want to reach out, you're going to have to work to find those university level engagements. But otherwise, expect to be more focused on where you're specifically studying and being surrounded by people who are interested in the same areas and are doing in-depth research there. So other things you want to do is so I mentioned being two-on-one with faculty. You're going to have closer working relationships with faculty. All the more reason to get to know your faculty now and practice building those relationships. Because when you get to graduate school, you're going to be near peers to faculty. If you're getting a PhD, you're going to end up at the same level of education as that faculty member. So you want to be able to have a good working relationship with them, be able to be respectful while also, engaging in co-learning. That's what happens at the graduate school level. Seasonal breaks are usually a time to continue work. I like to throw this one in there because you might expect to go on spring break in grad school and still have those nice built-in breaks, or there's the long winter break. You still get those breaks from classes maybe, but you might have to catch up on research during those times. If you're a graduate teaching assistant, then once class ends, you still have grading responsibilities. You still have to prepare for the next semester. So it's not as cut and dry as once it's spring break, you're gone. You might still be on campus for spring break. So that's just something to really realize. It's more of a full-time job even than undergrad. And graduate school is difficult. There's no softening that really. It's going to be difficult, but it really is rewarding. If you want to go to graduate school because you really are passionate about a topic, then the difficult work is worth it because you're going to feel fulfilled by the work you're doing, the research you're doing. And for those of you going to graduate school now or in the future, I'm going to tell you, because it's difficult, that you should seek out resources when you need them. Prioritize your well-being now and in graduate school, because your mental health really affects your physical health really affects how well you can do academically. If you're exhausted all the time, if you're in pain, if you are suffering from depression, that's going to affect how well you can do in school. So don't ignore those needs in order to push yourself for all-nighters or just focus on school and deal with the rest later. They're all connected. So prioritize taking care of yourself. That's kind of my soapbox. I make sure to mention it at all of my presentations. So take care of yourselves now and in the future. If you prioritize your well-being, your academics will follow. And with that, that wraps up what I have to talk about. So if any of you have any questions, please send them to the chat and we'll go through those. My contact information is on here as well if you want to talk individually. And again, we'll be here on Thursday talking more specifically about the application process.
Thank you, Courtney. That was such wonderful advice. What a great comprehensive presentation.
Thank you.
I do have a couple questions already for you. How about, what is your advice on grad school letters of recommendation? Does it look more favorably to have letters from a professor, or are other letters welcome too?
Other letters are welcome too. I would say you want at least one faculty member, maybe 2, and that's because it's an academic setting. But depending on the program you're applying to, if it's a program that values working experience or that requires you to be good with working with people, then a work supervisor would be really important. Or if you did extensive service in an area and like the site supervisor knows a lot about how much you worked with people, how well you did, that can be a good letter too. It varies on the individual. So if you're thinking maybe a letter outside of faculty, it's probably something to consider, and we could talk about that more individually as well.
Oh, wonderful. How about regarding a personal statement? So what resources are available to assist students with writing their personal statement?
It's a great question. I do at least 1 workshop a semester on writing personal statements, usually 2. I also offer in-person meetings to kind of introduce you to the personal statement, talk about what it looks like, what it might look like for you, and I am happy to read personal statements and give you feedback on them. So those are my resources available to you. Your faculty may be willing to read your personal statements, but anytime I'll be advertising personal statement workshops again in the fall. And if you want to just meet with me and talk about what it is, maybe you're thinking about brainstorming one now, we can talk about that in person, absolutely. And like I said, I like to give feedback on personal statements, so don't hesitate to email me.
That's great. It definitely is a perk being at a small school like Mercer to have just you helping students with personal statements.
Exactly.
How about, we have another question. What's a reasonable number of graduate schools to apply to?
Yeah, so it's really easy to get carried away and kind of just want to apply to everything that you can. But I usually recommend that you apply to 4 graduate schools. There are a few reasons for this. One is that when you take the GRE, for example, they'll send your scores to up to 4 schools for free. After that, you have to pay usually a nominal fee, maybe like $15 for each school that you send your scores to. So that in itself is a good reason why you should narrow it down to 4. You might choose 5 or 6 for personal reasons or because you just can't pick, but usually I recommend 4 as an average. The other reason for that is that it gives you the opportunity to give you kind of like a range of schools you're applying to. One of those schools is going to be your dream school. If you got into this, you would be amazed, you would be ecstatic. You almost are like, you just barely meet the requirements. It's a great program. You'd really love to get there. That's your dream school. The next 2 are schools that you're excited about, schools that you meet the requirements for. They're great, they're good programs, and you're fairly confident you can get in, right? It's a little, maybe it's 60-40, but you're pretty sure you can get into them. And that last one is going to be a safety school. So it's one where you blow the requirements out of the water, you can get in there, you can get the education you need, and you'll have something planned. And maybe even get, because it's the type of program, you maybe even be able to even get a better financial award at those schools. So having a safety school is, in my opinion, important.
Well, that is excellent advice. And I think that's all of our questions we have today. We are so thankful that you presented this webinar for us. And as Kim mentioned earlier, and I did as well, we will be putting this up on our YouTube channel later today or tomorrow. So anyone who would like to review it can do it there.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.
And at this time, I think we'll go ahead and conclude the webinar. Thank you all.